Hello, let's talk about The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Kthrn Arden, a 2024 historical fiction fantasy LGBTQT plus novel, very kind of gently on kind of gay themes in the novel, very quite gentle. Set during World War One, 1917, 1918, 1919. Starts in Halifax with the 1917 explosion, where there were 1,782 people killed, over 9,000 people injured. Goes off into into kind of Belgian, France, where we have Passendale, various kind of things that are kind of pretty well-known markers for Canadian World War One history. As a Canadian, I've heard a lot about them. I'll come back to that note at the end of this review. I listened to it on audio, narrated by January Lavoie, doing the point of view of Lauren Ivan, a nurse who is wounded. Came back from the front to Halifax. Unfortunately, got to have that. Her parents died at the very beginning of the book as a result of the explosion. And Michael Crouch, who narrates Freddie Ivan, Wilfred, who is a Canadian soldier in France, who gets buried alive. Basically, there's a giant explosion. A pillbox gets flipped over, and he is trapped inside with somebody else. Who is that somebody else? Hans Witte, a German soldier, older, former farmer. We find out he's kind of pretty cultured, fluent in English, and we go from there. They are Freddie and Hans fall into the hands of this stranger. I won't go too much into him. Otherworldly, offers sanctuary. It's very unsettling. Plays the violin. Was a bad soldier in his past. And there's definitely kind of very much metaphors for what the war does to people. It seems to be kind of used as that kind of idea. It is a book where, again, the Angel of Mons gets referenced in here, just as it did in Angel Down that I read recently by Daniel Kraus. Very much kind of war trauma, very much concerning these Canadians, and there's some Brits and the odd American. I found this book. I had read Kthrn Arden before, The Bear and the Nightingale, which is much more kind of a straight fantasy novel set in kind of a medievalish kind of setting, in 2017, and I'd had difficulties with that book because it just seemed like it took forever for the story to start. And I mean, I guess maybe that's part of a trilogy that I never continued on. So maybe it could be kind of, that's a part of the pacing. However, this seems to be a fully contained book in itself, and I found the same problem, that it just kept on going and going. It felt very stretched out to me, very much like, at first I was like, okay, is it old-fashioned storytelling? She's like a good writer. Like, these are interesting characters, but I just felt like it just like kept on going, and it took forever for things to start, and then it was kind of resolved. It was like this. I almost feel like this would have been better as a novella, a kind of a ghost story novella, with the same characters. It's just like, it just seemed to be extremely drawn out to me. There is also the thing of, like, as a Canadian, this says far more to me about the system of history teaching in Canada. World War One is pretty central in Canada as an idea of being, this is the moment when Canada was born as a country, when we sent all our young people off to get slaughtered in a war under Britain. I that's a point of view. I don't know if I particularly agree with that point of view, but there's definitely this thing of like, here's a battle that we were bathed in fucking blood in. I have an ambivalent feeling towards that, and as this book kind of depicts kind of an ambivalent feeling towards World War One, which I think it actually captures as much as the Angel Down also captured that of like, why are we fighting this war? This is the first of the kind of the great massive slaughters. There are no heroes. This is a brutal meat grinder of a thing where it's not how, you're just your bodies, your carcasses, your meat. This destroys the idea of the hero of kind of the hero's adventure of glorious knights going off into battle. Like, no, this is young people getting sent into a situation where you just get murdered and murdered and murdered to capture a hill that then maybe gets lost, and then you try and capture it again, and everyone gets murdered and it kills so many people. But yeah. So there's that kind of a deadening feel. It took me a while to get through this, even as an audiobook, to like, okay, let's get back to it and listen to it. And I mean, it's done well, but it's still, I had no enthusiasm throughout that. And by the end, it was just like, I feel like this could have been told in a tighter, more efficient manner, maybe maybe would have had more impact on me if it had. It also, so that's the kind of the general story of it. I do, I did care for Laura and Freddie and Hans at the thing. I was less kind of taken up by the kind of the fantasy elements of it, of this stranger and him, basically kind of an energy vampire or a memory vampire, I guess is what that figure is. I was less taken up by that. Sometimes the fantasy elements can help be the sugar that can kind of like, get you through what's, the really depressing nature of a story like this. There's a interesting authors afterward at the end where, Kthrn Arden is a American writer, and talking about how the U.S.'s ignorance about World War One, and how much of an impact it actually did have on the generation of American people. But it's kind of confusing because you're using Canadian characters to tell that the two main characters are Canadians, and are you saying Canadians and Americans are identical that way? Because my experience as a Canadian is obviously sounds like it's different than what an American view of World War One is, or maybe a certain generation of Americans now have forgotten this war, whereas as a 50-year-old Canadian, I very much got a lot of World War One in my education growing up. Maybe that's not the case anymore. I don't know. But it's like, well, why use Canadian characters to tell, if you're trying to kind of get Americans more enlightened by their own experience in the war? The Americans also paid a terrible cost in World War One as well. So I'm slightly confused by that as the afterword. So yeah, Kthrn Arden, I think, is somebody who maybe I'm just not meshing with. I know there's some authors where it's just like, I feel like, I just feel like the things drag and I get bored. And not bored in a, I don't know. It's just, I feel like, okay, I get the point. Can we get to the story? And there's so much set up, so slow. And it's not like dread or world building. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm I am lukewarm on The Warm Hands of the Ghosts by Kthrn Arden. All right. I've been Jay. More videos later.